of land we produce, you can produce about 20 pounds of essential amino acids from peas, about 71 pounds of essential amino acids from beef. We produce 6,000 pounds. And it's a very unique protein with all the essential amino acids and more total essential amino acids than whey and egg. And then the water, you need about 9,000 gallons, about 4 liters of fresh water to produce 1 pound of essential amino acids. From peas, 17,000 from beef, we use basically 0. So we have a unique technology to produce omega-3 and protein, and we already have several products in the market. We started with the supplement part, but then we will be jumping soon to food and adult nutrition components based from our algae. Our unique algae nanochlorosis is different. It produces one unique omega-3, is EPA only in a polar lipid form, which makes us extremely bioavailable. So our absorption is almost 3 times more than fish oil and almost twice as krill oil, and is, you know, plant-based. We are growing it in places where otherwise, you know, they could not do anything. We just recently published a clinical study, peer review. It was published in Nutrients, which is one of the top scientific food and ingredients magazine in the world, top 10 actually. And we are showing that within 3 months in healthy population, we are decreasing in over 72% of the participants' total cholesterol. Is a double blind with placebo, decreasing VLDL, which is one of the bad cholesterols, over 25%, decreasing hip circumference, significantly improved liver function. So we are really doing amazing things. Yesterday, as you saw, Sonny, we launched a product called Cholesterol, and together with Immunity and with Brain. So really, really excited about that. What we are trying to do is not to sell sustainable products or green products. We are trying to sell the best products available in the market and do it at a competitive price, and also make them vegan and sustainable, right? But we want the customers to buy our products because it's the best option they have. The protein, again, is one of the best, if not the best protein I've ever seen, and I've dealt with proteins all my life. This is one of the pictures of one of our farms. This is just 1/3. We have 100 acres. We have another farm with 50 acres. But our 150 acres is interesting because of the productivity equals to 45,000 acres of peas in terms of production of essential amino acids. So we are really making an impact on, you know, the use of land and the use of water. We had just launched these products that I said, and what we are, you know, we are a global company, and we are in all the main retailers in the United States today, and keep growing. You know, we are now moving very strongly towards, you know, we are moving towards direct to consumer. By the way, because it's investors, just to give you a quick overview, the omega-3 business is a $33 billion business worldwide. The supplement business is a $200 billion business. And when you add proteins, plant-based proteins is really huge. And then we have the, you know, the D2C, which we are growing both in our website and Amazon. And just basically, we have an amazing executive team, multifunctional, from different industries, extremely successful. And finally, because I want to go quick, we are just expanding. We are about to start selling in India in Q4. We will be selling in Australia, thankfully, in Q4 too. And then next year it will be Europe, Japan, and well, many other areas. So thank you very much for your time. Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, you can stop the sharing.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel, because that presentation, very quick presentation, gave our audience a very quick overview of what algae is basically in terms of food nutrition. Thank you very much for that. So next, thank you, Miguel. Next, I'd like to move to Jag Kaurah. Jag, can you please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, what you do, which company you represent, and how are you involved in algae?
Well, thank you very much. In fact, this system that you're using is very interesting. I like the system. Anyway, by the way, I'm 80 years old today, this birthday. But what is important is that in 2006, I decided to do one last project on my life, which would be to help the world, help planet Earth, and help people. And I looked at all various things, because in my life, I've been very innovative. There are many things I've invented, done better than others. So I thought, now I must do something for the planet and for people. And I looked around. I had done some research in solar in the past, but solar was already becoming good. There were a lot of people getting into it. But microalgae, which had a huge, absolutely massive potential, was not moving very much. And I decided, okay, let me try and see what I can do with microalgae. Now, in the US had realized that microalgae is a huge potential. So they had set up what was known as the Aquatic Species Program, which started in 1976 and ended in 1996. And the final report came out in 1998. Generally, within the microalgae industry, that became known as the Bible of the microalgae industry. They recommended the raceway pond that Miguel has. Now, the problem that raceway pond is great because it's a lot more productive than normal ponds, but it's got certain limitations. And the Bible of the microalgae industry stated that closed systems which could overcome some of these systems is unlikely ever to become economic. So I decided to concentrate on the hardest problem possible, and many universities had already started doing research on because the American government had funded almost all the major universities to do microalgae research during that period. But raceway pond is what they came up with. So I decided to do the difficult part, do it in a closed system, but where the productivity, the cost of the final product would be as competitive as the raceway pond, which was thought will never be possible. And my first patent, which I filed in February 2007, was published by WIPO 4th of September 2008. This was a major sensation because I showed a closed system which could be competitive. And everybody, or almost everybody in the world, tried out my system, including NASA, including the Weizmann Institute of Israel, including the Europeans, including the Australians. Almost everybody in the world tried out my system, but I was not happy with it. So by about 2010, I abandoned that project. And some people actually used my system after that because I had abandoned the project. Because I wanted something even better and lower costs. So I tried, it's amazing, 15 years, I tried so many systems, so much of money spent on R&D. Now I believe we have a closed system technology which can not only compete with raceway ponds, but which can compete with even agriculture in some of the things, which is exactly what I wanted to do, because that is the point where it can start changing the world. Right. It's not just projects we are interested in, we want to change the world. So now, just a few months ago, I decided to go commercial. Our first project is now on small scale, it'll be expanded, and by end it'll be a much bigger project. Then we have got one more project coming up in another state of Malaysia called Sabah, which is quite a much bigger one. And then we got a project coming up in Queensland, Australia, which will be quite a lot bigger. So the technology is such that people are wanting to take it up. I really don't seem to have too much of a problem getting my partners, in this. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it for Earth. I'm excited about it for the health, because remember, microalgae is by far the healthiest of all food. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for giving that background about my other advantages, the benefits of microalgae. Thank you very much for that. So the last, speaker we have is Ayush. Ayush, welcome to our VCTV again. Thanks for your time. I would like you to introduce yourself, and also I'd like to ask you a question because you are into venture capital funding. I would like to know how blockchain technology and tokenization can help this industry grow by getting more funds into the space. Thank you. Ayush, over to you.
Thank you, Soni. Thank you, Soni, for again inviting me. I'm Ayush. I represent Instarto. We at Instarto are a reverse mechanism platform which works with a closed network of investors. So our investors essentially include family offices, HNIs, venture capital firms, and corporate funds. We typically look at every sector, agnostic towards sectors. We look at any deal which is anything in the north of $1 million, go up to about $40 million in terms of ticket size. We've worked for sectors including, we have in fact very actively worked for sectors like agri-tech also. So quite excited to look at it even more now. Post-pandemic, I guess, agriculture has picked up even more. And over the course of last, just to answer your question, in the course of last couple of years, agriculture has been seeing a lot of VC interest specifically, a lot of investor interest, primarily for 3-4 reasons. One, this sector is one which is the most unorganized till date. And there are people who are trying to bring about some significant changes to the existing ecosystem of agriculture and aquaculture, which also includes algae culture. People are trying to bring about blockchain into the system, which is going to totally transform the way agriculture has been. And this is a big industry minded because it's a $5 trillion plus of industry with about 40% of people employed across the globe into this particular sector. In terms of how the way the blockchain can actually bring about a lot of change in this particular industry is, so there are problems related to upstream, middle stream, and downstream, all of them, whether that be the precision of the way one wants to produce a crop or algae, or whether it be into the overall digitization or standardization of things, or whether it be things to do with quality of a crop or algae, or whether it be the supply chain or the micro mobility or micro supply. So everything needs to be digitized, standardized, and it needs blockchain to sort of solve that problem. Using blockchain, there are a lot of problems which can be solved, whether that be financing, insurance, the quality of information. So say, for example, there's a crop or that is being produced, the way it changes hands and reaches your dinner table. Until that point, you need to have some sort of quality mechanism in place, which could be absolutely solved using blockchain as a technology, underlying technology, and the tokenization of that actually makes it a commercial proposition for anyone to enter into that space. Also, I would say, whether it be crop and food production or the procurement tracking, or for that matter, maybe anything to do with the weather conditions, the crisis control, all of that can be managed using blockchain. There are a lot of solutions which people are currently working on into blockchain. I guess, so there are a lot of opportunities around supply chain as well, which people are working on. And yes, so I guess there are quite a lot of possibilities in agriculture and aquaculture going forward, and look forward to a wonderful session today.
Okay, thank you, Ayush. Thank you for those insights and the benefits of the underlying blockchain technology into the industry. Lovely, so very good. Miguel, I'd like to ask the question to you. So, what kind of investments are getting done into algae farming? Is it like, do we see more private investors, angel investors, VCs, or what kind of investments are getting done into the space?
So I'm going to try to be brief. Historically speaking, the main investment in this industry has been government via grants. So there was a lot of people investing in microalgae for biofuel investments, like the picture of the farm I have behind is. It used to be a biofuel farm that we took over together with a group of investors, and now because it was more about R&D, developing new technologies. As the technology and the companies have been evolving more towards, food-like companies, because we have products that people can touch and people can start consuming. The type of investor is changing. Of course, there's a lot of angel investors with small companies that start, and I'm always a big promoter of, technology. As Jack said, I would love this industry to flourish because it's going to be impactful for our kids and the way we eat. And because, there are now products in the market, and we are now approaching mass distribution and globally, there's other people investing, which is VCs, there are family offices investing, and private investors, as well as government. So the beauty is that we are getting more credibility. In the United States, algae became part of the Farm Bill in 2018, which is a very important thing because that allows to get insurance for the crops and financing, similar to another crop. There are other challenges because, we still need to talk about productivities and all that. But the reality is that the industry is moving fast. We are pushing a lot in order to make algae a regular crop, in order to get more funds and more companies to be interested in investing. So thankfully, now the spectrum of investors in the algae in general and microalgae in particular is broader, thankfully. And you can see more, one usual suspects starting to invest in algae-based companies like us, for example.
Great. Thank you, Miguel. I've got another question to ask you. So do you see a lot of blockchain integration into these agri-tech space, algae farming space?
So not, the answer is not enough. I do believe that this is a great opportunity, not just for agriculture, is to finance assets, to finance boats, to finance many different things. And in this particular case, it is great both for financing, and as I mentioned in a previous conversation we had, to me, it's also critical in order to guarantee food safety, traceability, and making sure that the customer receives the best of the best, and they know what they are buying in every moment, right? So I do believe that there's an opportunity to grow the involvement of blockchain technology into farming in general and to algae farming in particular.
Great. Thank you, Miguel. Thanks for that. Next, Jag, I would like to ask you this question. So what kind of investments, because you've been in this industry for like so many years, so what kind of investments have actually flown through to these years, and what investments are currently being done in this space?
I might not be the best person to answer that because for the last 15 years, we've been pure R&D. We have not done any commercial production in the past. Our commercial production only started last few months. Now we are expanding our first farm, and we are getting a few more farms coming up. In terms of funding our R&D, we did it was mainly my money at the beginning. Then the Malaysian government gave us a little bit, and then it is basically my friends, family, and associates have been coming in because they have got very excited about what we are achieving. So, but now going forward for commercial projects, we need to start looking at something like what you're doing.
Right. Get it. Thank you, Jag. So next, I would like to ask a very different question. So we have spoken about, like Miguel said, Ayush said, is VCs and private investors are actually getting interested on top of the government funding. So what about the retail investors, Ayush? What do you think about how can the retail investors, people like me and you, I mean, not you, sorry, people like me, how can I be part of this project? How can I get some investments done into such a great project with a little less ticket size?
So I guess, anyways, I mean, so I guess that brings us to tokenization, right? I mean, end of day, what is important is, if blockchain can solve this problem, like Miguel rightly mentioned, then if the tokenization of that is possible, then it opens up doors for both the retail investors and the institutional investors. Of course, tokenization earlier was more so open for retail investors. I mean, it was more retail investors who were getting into individual investors who were showing confidence towards cryptocurrencies. But it's now, I mean, very aggressively, the institutional investors are also looking at this proposition. So I guess that's an open door to sort of, because this is a transparent way of investing, less cost, less complexity, more secure, opens up doors for global investments, and you have cross-border trade and commerce, all of that coming into play. So I guess then retail investors from across can help a company like any company into algae farming, and including Rick's company, to raise great amount of investments with a concept like that, of course.
Great, Ayush. So that brings us very smoothly to Richard Berman. So basically, he has a very interesting project, not only because he is into algae farming, but he has built this technology using blockchain technology and also tokenized his project. And we like to hear from him, his story. And please feel free to ask questions after this, because I'm really curious about why did he decide to tokenize it in the first place. And okay, Rick, welcome to our show. Please start with a short introduction about yourself, then you can talk about your project and all those interesting journey that you had.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, my story on how I got into algae is maybe a little bit or a lot different than our other guests. Primarily, my background is in healthcare finance. So specifically, I was involved for many, many years as a CFO and sometimes CEO of problemed American, or what they call at-risk American healthcare operators, specifically ones that ran afoul of our Medicare system. And so it's a very challenging business, and I spent a lot of time in it. And then, one day I just got really tired of it. And I had an opportunity from some friends of mine that were trying to take a company public. And for a while, I worked at KPMG, and I got involved with securities registrations. And so I just retired from the healthcare business the first time and got involved in this project. And at the time, this particular company was involved with uranium and what we call alternative energy. And so I helped get this company registered and quickly found out if you're going to be in the uranium business, you don't need tens of millions of dollars, you need billions of dollars. So I sold all the assets of this uranium company, and then went back and told the company, I said, where would you like to go now? Figuring they'd say healthcare because of my background. They said, no, we want to be in the renewable energy business. So the sum total of my knowledge of that was zero. And so, but I quickly got involved with it. And at this time, this is probably 2008, at the end of 2008, in America, we were real keen on having biofuels, advanced biofuels, and some people call it biodiesel. But there was a big issue with diverting food from like corn and wheat and barley, diverting food, which we needed, to feedstock for renewable energy. So I set about to find a non-edible form of feedstock, which was algae. Then I got involved with a couple of the trade organizations in America at the time, and it became apparent after talking to some of the government agencies that there was a real problem with algae, and by that time they had sunk over $2 billion in projects that basically proved nothing except you couldn't grow it sustainably or in scalability outdoors, and you had all sorts of problems with growing it outdoors. So when I talked to people like the Department of Energy and the renewable energy labs, I said, why would we be spending $2 billion of the taxpayers' funds to keep making the same mistake over and over again? They said, that's a real good question. Why don't you figure out how to make it better? I said, well, the answer to that ought to be simple. You need to be doing it indoors. And they said, well, go figure out how to do it indoors. So that is exactly what I did. I grabbed a chemical process engineer that used to be the Texas plant manager from Formosa Plastics, which at the time was the largest plastic manufacturer in the world. And then I also had a biologist from our school here, Rice University. And the premise of my project was to be able to produce a system and a process to make reliable, sustainable, scalable, predictable algae biomass in an indoor climate controlled environment. And that's a mouthful, but that's what I set to do. And we started with a trash can with lights in it. And I said, before we start pouring $1 million into this, let's see what we can do with this trash can. So within a week, we started and inoculated the trash can 3 different times and made 3 different strains of algae. So it worked. Okay, so now we go to a pilot to scale reactor. It's called photo bioreactor, and without getting too technical, it's a form of growing algae. You can use bioreactors outdoors, but obviously this one was indoors. So we successfully were able to do this over a period of time. And we noticed, we try to compare our growth to what an outdoor growth is. And the only way you can do that is indoor acre versus an outdoor acre. So, and we had modular and scalable equipment that we developed throughout the years, one of which is called a BioG. And that particular device, the last version of it was 4,000 gallons, and it looks really similar to, if you go into one of those craft brewery places, where probably anywhere in the world, and it looks kind of like a big ice cream cone, and it has, it starts off as a cylinder on the top and then comes down to like a cone. So 80% of it is the growth area or production area, and as it turns into biomass, it filters down into the cone part, and that's like 20%. So it harvests in the same unit. So at any rate, we can produce in an indoor 50,000 square foot building, of which the bulk of that would be production area. We could produce approximately 2.9 million pounds of algae biomass on an annual basis. And that is with dry weight with oil inside. And so you could either sell this to people that want to extract the oils out themselves, or for more money, a surcharge, we can extract it ourselves. So that was the basis. And then we had a couple of misfires actually trying to sell the product to sell the technology. And we never really got into the commercialization part. But one thing we did notice is that throughout the years, the emphasis on what algae can be used for has totally changed. For instance, in the very beginning, there was really 2 uses. One was the non-edible form of feedstock, which cost a lot of money to make and is probably the least profitable of anything you could possibly make. And then the other is the nutraceutical side, which produces the omega-3. And a lot of people don't realize this, but this morning or all day long, you might have already had omega-3 if you ate fish, drank milk, had chicken, anything. Almost every animal ingests some type of algae. So my focus over the years has become to move away from the quote agricultural side to the specialty chemical side. And kind of like as an accident, I had this handed to me. Our United States Patent and Trademark Organization, they're pretty tough to deal with. So along the way, I wanted to trademark and get a registered trademark for Algae Farm. And as everybody in our panel knows this and has said it multiple times, right, the word Algae Farm is used over and over and over. If you look on Google, there may be 100+ pages of algae farm. So some people might say that's a generic term. Well, okay, the attorney from the USPTO said it was a generic term as well. And I spent 2 years fighting with him over it. But what he did ultimately is he gave me, or granted me, the registered trademark. But the way he did it, and he was really far ahead of his time, much further than I was and anybody else that I knew at that time. He showed me all the things that it could be used for, almost like in a crystal ball. Wow. And he used, and the classification, if you watch mine, is specialty chemical. Right. I mean, he was talking about using it for bioplastics 10 years ago. And to this day, I'm sure people on the panel will tell you that is just in its infancy to be able to use algae as bioplastics. So I've positioned myself at this company and these assets to be different than the other panelists because it's the big market. Just to give you an idea, the algae contributory market, which I'll define that is anything that algae is used for, whether it be food, bioplastics, solar, energy, in 2018 was $9.9 billion. It's been consistently growing at an adjusted rate of 7%, which is about $1 billion a year. I don't have the 2019 numbers, but it should be well over $10 billion. The specialty chemical market, I mean, the food market, I think Miguel, I don't remember what he said, but it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars. The specialty chemical market last year was $1.9 trillion. So basically, I'm the type of person, if everybody goes to the right, I try to go to the left. But I try to get there a different way. And so is a big market. I don't see any point, and I didn't see any point in the very beginning of doing what everybody else does. If you can make algae outdoors, like apparently some of you guys can, and you do it without having all the contamination problems, that's wonderful. I know what I do indoors works, and I reduce the number one problem, which is the contamination. And then of course, I control all the variables. I have the sun with my LED lights. I have the water control, and I use a continuous system rather than the batch system, which you have to use outdoors primarily. So anyway, this is how I started. And people will say, well, okay, you're a specialty chemical. What is your product? So my product, which I also have a trademark for, is called Alg Oil, ALGOIL. And that essentially is what I envision is to be able to sell alg oil as a commodity. And my revenue sources would be this. I can sell it as a commodity, get a listing once we have investors, of course, so I can produce enough of it. And people would buy this, and maybe even some of you who have your own products, even though you manufacture for yourself, there may be a point in time where you need more than just what you manufacture or different species, which we'll get into that in a second as well. So I would want to sell my alg oil as a component, a contributory component of an existing product. So somebody might buy it to use it as a fuel cell for a solar panel, or they might use it for food. They might use it in these emerging markets, which is like cannabis, solar, photovoltaic batteries, and bioplastics. That would be my primary revenue source. The other is, and again, I throughout the years have made several contacts, what I would say strategic partnerships or alliances if I was in production. Cannabis is a big product, especially in Canada, which actually our company is out of Canada. It's a Canadian company, even though I'm American and live in Houston. And Canada is 100% cannabis legal, right now. And one day we will be in America. So a lot of people might not know this, but CBD and CBG, what's called cannabinol, you can use omega-3 and anti-inflammatory in that. But the emerging market, the big prize for the future is what's called cannabinoid, which is an opioid replacement. As most people know, we have a huge problem in many places in the world, but in America, it is a really huge problem of people being addicted to these opioids. And the reason you take the opioids is to reduce the pain and the inflammation. Well, there's studies that are being done and using algae-based or algae-derived cannabinoids. So it's the combination of the THC from the cannabis and the omega-3s that reduce the inflammation and block the pain. And the good news is, unlike morphine, nobody is getting strung out on cannabinoids. So these are existing things for the future. And so my revenue, not to digress, but my revenue opportunities would be to have these contributory component and sell this by the kilo, maybe have some private label products. Also, I'm big in technology. Now, I wouldn't profess to be able to produce solar panels and photovoltaic batteries, but I have a preliminary design for those that are algae derived, and they run with a solar panel, which you can, a solar panel is, you have to have something that's photosynthetic. And so there have been studies, and quite successful, from NASA in that have shown that you can make a solar panel that's algae derived. So I would get involved with licensing the IP and technology to companies in that space around the country. So having said all that, now—
Miguel has a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Miguel has a question for Richard.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the strain of algae that you are thinking about using? And
I'm glad you said that.
if you're interested on the cannabinoid part of it.
Yes, excellent question. As opposed to yours, which is Nanachloropsis, mine, I spent a lot of time on various strains, and I wanted to find something that was almost the perfect mix of EPA and DHA. And so mine, the base is Pavlova luthieri. You may be familiar with that. And that's one of the ones that are like spirulina and Nanachloropsis that are involved with omega-3. But if you look at the makeup, some are more EPA heavy, some are more DHA heavy. This is about the perfect mix of EPA and DHA. And so my alg oil is based on Pavlova.
Okay. So Miguel, you have any other questions? Because
No.
okay, great. Ayush?
Thanks for that question. All right, so now we're going to get into the good part.
Okay.
The tokenization, as you're aware, we especially people in Houston, we've been like captive and supposed to stay at home, and I guess Miguel may go out more than I do, but I got off the road from my healthcare deal, commuting back and forth to California, and really was like looking for something to do. And I thought, I was reading all these things about tokenization, and I thought, I don't know anything about this, but it sounds like a great idea of raising money for the commercialization of my intellectual property and proprietary technology. So I started talking to people and I have a friend in London, who led me to LATOKEN. And I was talking to a couple of people there, and they brought me along and basically gave me a framework and convinced me that raising the money become commercialization of my intellectual property was very feasible if it's done the right way. And so I decided on coming up with developing a asset-backed utility token, and using my intellectual property and proprietary technology that exists and has already been developed, and part of it has been valued as the asset to back and securitize it, for lack of a better word, the token. So the first token is BIOG, and it has just become listed, and it is a asset-backed utility ERC20 token. And we have several trading pairs, like with BTC and so on, and USDT, as well as the Ethereum. And the purpose of this is to commercialize, to finance the commercialization of my algae farm intellectual property and technology. And so BIOG is the symbol for BioG, which is the photobioreactor that I developed. We have, and that one, like I said, is just listed, and we plan on using this to raise the funds. I have another one that I just developed, and it has not been listed yet, but it's on the it's been the contract has been perfected and it's been tested, and that one is called AGOL, or short for algae oil. And right. If you look that one up on Etherscan, it'll show up. And so my purpose is to sell these tokens to both retail as well as to try to attract institutional investors, whether it be family office, venture capital, and so on, to finance my project. I have been involved with private equity here in America, as well as public companies. And like, for instance, the public companies, it's a great idea if you're dealing with billions of dollars, but the compliance and the things you have to do are just really cumbersome and quite expensive. The private equity is a short-term play. Most people want to develop something and string several companies together, then exit the space in 5 years. This gives the customer or the person who holds the token a chance to have something of value for their investment immediately, and they don't have to wait for me to do X, Y, and Z. If I keep the public abreast of my, which I certainly would and plan on doing, of my activities and the developments and successes that we're having, then the token will increase in value. And mine, since it's backed with real technology, the BIOG is coming out at $1. And it's not like a fraction of a penny or these micro tokens. And that's just with no income. That's based on what I've done so far. And so if you're coming out at $1, common sense would tell you, once you get going and this becomes a successful commercial venture, as long as you don't dilute the tokens, the tokens should go up in value. And so that's what my purpose is. And I'd just like to, several people asked me some questions. So if I could just read, there's only like, I think 6 of them. If I could just run through these really fast.
Okay,
I mean,
then
really
we'll flow to questions and questions from our speakers.
Okay.
Unless Ayush has a burning question right now.
Yes, sir. A couple of quick questions. Okay. One, since Richard mentioned that it's more internal algae farming that we are doing, he's doing. So is it cost effective as compared to the outdoor farming? One. Two, what would be the use cases or the sectors that you would be addressing? So one, I understand, the biofuel is one. The the BioG that you've come with, the algae oil is one, addressing that sector. But apart from this, medical, cosmetics, any other sector that you also plan to address down the line? And are there any competitors or any other players alongside in this space right now that you can think of? Sure.
One of the questions I was going to answer is exactly what you just said. People will ask, is it more cost effective to do this indoors than outdoors, or is it more expensive? Well, it would depend on how you do it. If you do it the right way, I can produce indoors the same it would take between 12 and 15 or 17 acres of outdoor production. And this is because the volume that I do, and because my devices are scalable and sustainable and modular. For instance, in 288 of my units that are 4,000 gallon units produce over 2.9 million pounds of this algae biomass in an indoor climate controlled building. So it is more cost effective, providing you know what you're doing, which if you don't, you're not going to be in business very long. Whereas outdoors, there's a lot of labor involved. I mean, there's obviously Miguel knows how to do this, because I think I know the one that he bought in New Mexico, and I know why they didn't work out. So the way I do it is high volume, but high purity as well, of which there's no point in getting to that now. Your other question, so yes, it is cost effective to do it indoors. And at the end of the day, I'm working on, depending on my economies of scale, between 35 and 43% EBITDA, which is very good. All right, so then the question is, yes, there's regarding what am I going to focus on? Well, you can't be everything to everybody. So in the very beginning, what I want to focus on is what's right in front of me. What is the existing market? The existing markets for what I can produce is called high value algae derived. It's would be in the food, or what they call the nutraceutical sector. So nutraceutical is quote vitamin pills, the omega-3 pills. The difference is we don't need the fish, because the way Miguel does it and the way I do it, we organically produce ultimately the omega-3s on our own ways of doing it. So that exists today. There's a market for that today. So using it for nutraceuticals, the cosmetics is one of the most profitable businesses on the planet. It uses a fraction, like 4 milligrams of that some people call it red algae. There's different kinds you can use, but the bottom line is it's enriched. You need the vitamins that come from the omega-3s, the EPA, the DHA, the ALA, the ARA, all of that comes in there. And if you can sell this as an algae enriched product, if you go to a place like Sephora or some of these other places, they have whole shelves that are algae derived, and the price is phenomenal. All right, so that is another one. And then and that exists today. And then so I'm going to focus on that, because it's easy enough to make it for all those uses. And then the other is huge market that I have some contacts in is CBD and CBG, or quote cannabinol. It's algae enriched gummies is what they call it, or edibles. Huge market for that.
Okay. Thank you. We have a hard stop at 9 p.m. So I just want to open up the floor for questions. Ayush, any further questions?
So I guess one last that I had before we end, and a couple of questions rather. One is, in terms of the competitive landscape, do you foresee, or do you think there is anyone who would be doing similar in and around the space, or maybe in terms of course, I understand you have a proprietary or a intellectual property in place. So I'm sure, as long as that be a thing, there's no competitor per se for the product that you have. But apart from that, any competitor that you foresee in and around this particular use case and what you're trying to build? question?
Well, there are competitors, big competitors in the industry. Archer Daniel Midland, DSM, Fuji Specialty Chemical, BASF, but they usually, like Miguel, he grows it and he uses it for his own product. Nobody that I'm aware of, one, has the classification that I have as a specialty chemical. That doesn't mean they can't get it, but it's not as easy as you think to get it. So I don't believe, and I know for a fact that nobody has a commodity listing. So right now, nobody has that. I will be the first one to have that. Will there be other competitors? Of course, it's a big world. You can't be everything to everybody. All I want to be is take everything I can and be profitable, because I'd rather be reasonable size and very profitable than go broke trying to chase everybody else. There's no glory in that. That's why I've been very careful to position myself the way that we have so far.
Sure.
Thank
and
you.
one last question from me. So, what would be the cost of current? So, I mean, if you compare apple to apple, the cost of algae farming versus, the the final product that comes out through the current ecosystem, how do you sort of map that? Do you think this is a more cost convenient way of going about it, the end product that you have in case of algae farming versus the current ecosystem?
Well, yes, because I know what my costs are, and wholesale, I can, I don't want to give away all my secrets, but I would not be exaggerating to say that there's significant, if it costs $2, you can sell it for $13. So yeah, I've got it down to like the gram of what it costs. I've done this so many times because metrics are important, and right now, at least where we are, and of course, people are looking for jobs, and a lot of the oil and gas technology and fabrication and so on, it might have cost a lot of money more to have these devices made 3 years ago when oil was $100 a barrel. Now these guys are all looking for jobs. So I think my economies of scale are really going to improve. They were good before, but now they're going to be great.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ayush. Miguel, you are growing algae outside. So is Jack. So what are your thoughts and questions? Any questions from you, Miguel?
No. No.
Okay. Jack?
Well, we are growing microalgae outside, but it is in a closed system, and closed systems you can make them very clean. That's the fundamental difference. And the microalgae that we have, for example, we grow spirulina also. It's got zero smell, zero taste. You can't get that from a pond. And you can put that into anything, and the food does not change its taste or its smell. So because of that, microalgae grown in a clean, closed environment can be used in anything.
Great. Thank you, Jack, for those inputs. I think we're just conscious of the time. 4 more minutes. Any last thoughts about why would somebody invest in Richard's project? Like, he has the blockchain technology.
Yeah, I just have to.
So why would somebody invest in Richard's project? Because he's got the blockchain technology, he's got the tokenization, he's got the indoors algae farming. Ayush?
So I guess a couple of reasons which I can foresee right away. One is, since he has a proprietary technology, that's of course something anyone would want to look at as an investor. Two, the use case or the industry that he's targeting is an essentials industry. So something which is going to be selling irrespective of how an economy works or not. Third is I guess the cost-effective way of how he's doing it is also something which is of interest, in like the EBITDA or the margins that he mentioned are humongous. I mean 30 to 43%. That's great. I mean, if that's the kind of EBITDA anyone would, as an investor, want to look at this. And, this looks quite promising that way.
Great, good news, Richard. Thank you so much, Ayush. Jag, so what are your thoughts? What do you think about Richard's project?
Well, first of all, because it is microalgae, microalgae, as the Americans say, I think it's this particular industry has got a great future. It's been a long time trying to develop the growing systems and getting to the right sort of product range. It was wrong for the industry to go for biofuels or the thing. That was certainly wrong. And I spoke out against it very strongly 10, 12, 5 years ago. And I'm very happy that the industry is moving into much higher value products. And as Richard is doing, but that's great. And I think the future for microalgae or algae will be great if it sticks to the higher value things.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jack. So basically, as Richard rightly said, one of his tokens is already listed on LATOKEN, and he's another token. He's got another token coming up, same asset-backed utility token. And obviously, he's looking to raise funds. So please, interested investors who are watching us today, please reach out to me, and I can, give you details about Richard's project, because obviously we are partners to him. So basically, this brings us to the end of the session. Thank you very much individually, Jag, Ayush, and Miguel, for your time today. I know Miguel is rushing for another meeting, a busy man. And I just want to say, we have these sessions running Monday to Friday on our VC TV. You can actually watch our shows at www.latoken.com/events. And depending on what is of your interest, please tune in and watch our shows. Thank you so much for this session today. Have a good evening, have a good night, have a good day, and stay safe and stay